What if I told you that the early church almost crashed and burned before it ever really got started? That's right. In this video, we're going to talk about a special trip Jesus makes to help prevent Peter and the other disciples from making a huge mistake. A mistake that, if not corrected, would have completely derailed the plans Jesus had for his church. Welcome to the Covenant Campfire. I'm Joshua, your humble shepherd and storyteller. And do I have an interesting story for you? If you stick around to the end, I think you'll find some very practical lessons in this story that are applicable to our own lives. This will help your walk with God and your life in general. So, let's begin. We start in John chapter 21. Jesus had already shown himself to the disciples twice during the 40 days he was still on the earth after his resurrection, but before he ascended to heaven. He was also showing himself to hundreds of people all over Jerusalem, people who became witnesses to his defeat of death and saw him in his glorified body. Sometime after the meeting with the disciples in the upper room, Peter says to the rest of the disciples, "I'm going fishing." They said, "We're going with you." Now, it's easy to think they were just going fishing as a hobby, but that's not what was happening. The disciples had decided they were done with their careers in ministry and were going back to the fishing business. So they went out in the boat that night and caught nothing. Absolutely nothing. But when morning came, Jesus stood on the shore, though the disciples did not know it was him. In verse 5, Jesus says to them, "Children, have you any food?" They answered him, "No." He said, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." This is interesting because if you remember back to the beginning of his ministry, when Jesus was calling the disciples away from their jobs, this is exactly how he introduced himself to Peter, James, and John. They had been out all night and caught nothing. Jesus told them to let down the nets. Peter replied something like, "We've been out here all night and caught nothing, but nevertheless I'll let down the net." So Peter half obeyed, and what happened? They had a giant catch they could hardly haul in. They had to call other people to help so the boat wouldn't sink. With that in mind, take a wild guess what happens this time. They cast the net and once again could not draw it in because of the multitude of fish. In verse 7, the disciple whom Jesus loved, John, says to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon heard that, he put on his outer garment, jumped into the sea, and swam to shore. The other disciples came in the boat, for they were not far from land, dragging the net full of fish. As soon as they came to land, they saw a fire of coals with fish laid on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you just caught." Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land, full of 153 large fish. And although there were so many, the net was not broken. Jesus said to them, "Come and eat." Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" knowing it was the Lord. They were probably wondering what he was doing there on the beach with them. I imagine they felt like they had been caught skipping school or skipping work to go have fun. After they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter in verse 15, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he had said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." Now, I've heard this story preached many times, and you probably have too. On the surface, it's a little confusing. Why does Jesus ask him 3 times, "Do you love me?" One popular opinion is that Jesus is asking 3 times because Peter denied him 3 times, as if to make him feel bad or remind him. But I'm not convinced that's what's happening here. I don't think that's why Jesus made a special trip to have breakfast with them on the shore. Something deeper is going on. In previous videos, we've talked about how the English language sometimes doesn't do the Word of God justice. This is one of those occasions. In English, we have only one word for love, but in Greek, the language the New Testament was written in, there are multiple words for different kinds of love. There's eros, romantic love; storge, family, parent-child love; phileo, brotherly affection or friendship love, from which we get Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love; and agape. Agape is the God kind of love. It's the highest, unconditional, sacrificial love. It's the word used for God's love for us and the love we're called to have for Him. So I'm going to read this passage again, starting in verse 15, using the actual Greek words, so you can see how the story deepens. When they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you agape me more than these?" In other words, am I your favorite, more than these fish, more than the fishing business? Peter answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you," meaning, I'm fond of you, I have brotherly affection for you. Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you agape me?" Peter said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you phileo me?" So you're just fond of me. You love me like a brother. Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you phileo me?" And he said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I phileo you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." So why did Jesus make this special trip to have breakfast with Peter and the disciples? Here's the hint. It wasn't to make Peter feel bad. It wasn't just to show himself a third time. And it wasn't because he liked bread and fish for breakfast. Jesus came back because Simon Peter had chosen to go his own way. Jesus had given him a purpose and a specific mission for the rest of his life, and Peter was walking away from it. If you don't remember, go back to Matthew 16:18, where Jesus changed Simon's name to Peter, which means rock, and said, "You are the rock on which I will build my church." So when Jesus shows up on the shore, what he's really saying is, "Hey, Peter, what are you doing here? This isn't your purpose. Get back to work, feed the flock, tend my sheep, live out the purpose I gave you, build my church." Peter had gone his own way. He and some of the other disciples had decided they were done with ministry. And if Jesus had not intervened at that exact moment, the church never would have gotten started. Think about that. Thousands upon thousands of early believers would never have heard the gospel. We wouldn't have the written word we have today. Because God cannot violate his own word, Jesus had to come back and talk some sense into Peter. There was no plan B. Peter was it. So Jesus made the special trip to get Simon Peter back on track, and he did it in a powerful, loving way. He didn't force him. He didn't give him a guilt trip. He simply asked a very penetrating question. Do you love me more than these fish? Am I, and the purpose I created you for, your favorite? What does it mean to make God your favorite? Here's the practical part. Ask yourself this question. Do you agape Jesus, or do you only phileo Jesus? Is Jesus your absolute favorite thing in life? The one you hold in the highest regard? Or are you just fond of him? If we're honest, most of us, myself included, agape other things more than Jesus. Our families, careers, money, comfort, sports teams, entertainment, etc. So how do we fix it? How do we learn to agape God above everything else? Jesus gives us the answer. In John 14:15 he says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." And in John 15:12 he gives us his new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Laying down our life doesn't mean physical death. It means laying down our psyche, our mind, will, and emotions, so we can pursue God's agenda instead of our own. Let's look at Peter one more time. He knew his purpose. Jesus had told him face to face, but he ditched it and went back to his comfort zone. In that moment on the beach, Peter did not have agape love for Jesus, but he was at least honest about it. Jesus then tells him in verse 18 that the day is coming when he will no longer go where he wishes, but will be led where he does not want to go. And perhaps that's a clue for all of us. If we are truly laying down our agenda for his, there are times we will find ourselves doing things we would never thought we would be doing. And he finishes with the simple command, follow me. It doesn't get more direct than that. In other words, stop doing life your way and walk the path I have prepared for you. That's the call for all of us. Will we make Jesus our favorite? Will we lay down our own plans and follow him, even when he leads us to uncomfortable places and people? This doesn't mean we have to leave everything to join the ministry like the disciples did. It just means making yourself available to be God's hands and feet here and now. God will meet you where you're at. But make no mistake, you were created on purpose and for a purpose. And Jesus is all about relationship, not religion. So, when he calls you to follow him, how will you respond? Because truly following Jesus every step of the way is the greatest act of love. That's all for this lesson, my friend, and I enjoyed our time together. If this time around, the Covenant Campfire inspired you or helped answer a question you've been dealing with, do me a favor, hit that like button so more people can find these lessons. Drop a comment below. What doubt or question with the Bible are you facing right now? And if you want more honest, real talk Bible teaching that meets you right where you are, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new lesson. Shalom, my friend, and God bless you.